Salutations and shit, folks. Welcome to another episode of your favorite travel podcast, Travel and Shit, where I, your host, D. Carrie, have an experiential conversation about the nuanced ways that travel intersects with regular life. And every episode, I'm reminded how much I talk with my hands. It is just such a joy to be reminded of little things about myself that I don't think about until I have to. So, if you'd like to see that along with the beautiful face that is joining me, I like to remind you guys when I have a guest, especially, that the podcast is also available on the YouTubes. So, there'll be a link to that in the description. And otherwise, to the beautiful face with me, please, Rachel, thank you for joining me so much. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, Travel and Shit podcast friends. My name is Rachel Leeke Alexis. I am a writer, I'm a poet, I am a yoga instructor, I am a model. I have so many different hats that I wear, and I would like to think that the number one role that I play in this world is as an adventurer. So I write love and travel. I was about to say I write travel and shit. I write love and travel, a newsletter that goes out and explores how when we expand the boundaries within our world, we expand the boundaries within ourselves. So I am so excited to be here. I cannot wait to get into this conversation, and yay, travel.
Yes, I think you are such a person in alignment with what Travel and Shit represents. And I don't know why it took so long to do this, but I'm glad we are finally here.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we were discussing before, my brain ended up connecting a bunch of dots. And this episode, I wanted to touch on some topics that came up in reading your Substacks.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was one that was recently posted, a BTS behind the Substack.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the creator that
Toby.
hosts that. Okay, is Cody like with a D or Colby with Colby?
Tobi, like
Tobi. Hey Toby, you're doing incredible work. Also, I really enjoyed this, and I feel like I read another person's a while back.
Mm-hmm.
So dig it. Shout out to Toby.
Yes.
And in your interview, something really jumped out at me. And so I'm going to scroll to, first of all, it was you talking about the stars on the plane that you were able to enjoy. We're flying out at the end of the month and it's an evening flight. And I am so hoping to have a celestial experience. I love anything that has to do with the stars, with the night sky. I'm low key ashamed. No, I don't want to say I'm ashamed. One of the dumbest purchases of last year, I bought a telescope.
That's not dumb at all.
It's dumb because I don't use it.
Okay.
That's why it's dumb. Like there's like a $500 telescope sitting under this table that has been used twice and not even well.
Okay.
So that was, but there is more time, God willing, to use it another day. But love everything celestial. So I'm really looking to stay awake long enough to look out the window. And you had mentioned about, for me, all about leading by example. I often hear people talk about they don't have time or they can't catch a flight. And it's really all about adventure doesn't even come that far from our front doors. I really, really love being able to, if you will, expand my experience of travel by tapping into more travel adventures or travel experiences at home. When we travel, my partner and I, we love a good park. We love a good restaurant. Those are two of the things that we actually do at home. And you had another quote in the piece where you said, and it's going to sound out of context, but y'all know how I do. Just follow along. The rabbit holes have connecting tunnels. We will we will flesh it all out. But one of the other quotes that you had in there that really stood out was, and what that really told me about love is it's about the journey, not the destination. I knew that once I touched the ground, whether I had a miserable time or a joyous time, I knew I already won. And I feel like oftentimes travel can be viewed through a lens of escape, that we are trying to, escape work, everyday responsibilities. And just that new environment gives us an opportunity to experience ourselves through a new lens. You're comparing and contrasting things about yourself with the community that you are new to on your travels. And I feel like if we are able to do that at home, like give ourselves more of a control sample, if you will, experience more of ourselves at home so that we have more points of personal to compare or contrast on our travels, we will be able to um, expand what we can actively get from travel. And through your 13 weeks of adventure
Yeah.
posts, I really fell in love with some of the destinations that you visited in New York. And so I wanted to talk with you about local discoveries, using adventures at home to broaden our experiences of self while we travel. I
Mhm.
told y'all I would get it fleshed out and we would get back together. We would get to the point. So, what is your experience of adventure? What is your experience of love? What brought you to writing Love and Travel?
So I love the way you pieced everything together.
Thank you.
My experience with love is such a broad question, right?
Hmm.
But what brought me to writing, and it'll piece into love, is sometimes my head gets so loud, it gets so crowded, it gets really overwhelmed with things. And there's been times where I can't express myself verbally because of the emotion or the buildup that's there. And the only way I can like let the pressure cooker steam is to like start writing it down
Mm-hmm.
and write out how I feel, write out what is going on inside of me. Um, I wake up and I have a journal. I've been keeping a journal for over 10 years where
Wow.
I try to write every single day. Sometimes, it doesn't happen, but I think the practice of, and now I can see it in the retrospective that of documenting my life. If I was to
Mm.
sit down and read through, I would have quite a very autobiographical example of like, what have you been struggling with for the past 10 years?
Yeah.
I don't even know, right? Like I haven't sat down and done that yet. But what writing does is it allows me to organize my thoughts.
Hmm.
And I find that in organizing my thoughts, then I'm able to connect with myself in a different way, right? Where I'm able to pull from considerations instead of
Hmm.
flashes of anger or those stray thoughts or doubts or anything that might not be completely thought out. um,
Hmm.
and so writing has been such a cathartic experience for me. I'm realizing that I value writing because there's this quote that says we write so we can taste things twice. You can,
Mm, wow.
yeah, I know. I don't even know who. I wish I could quote somebody for whoever said it, but it's true. I like sitting at my window and seeing something absolutely beautiful, and then taking the time to let it sit in me and digest, and then putting pen to paper to make it eternal, right?
Mm.
Like this is what writing is. I think about there's books and works that have been read for hundreds of years. And it's like, oh man, an artist never dies if their works are continuously referenced. So that's the macro of it. But the micro of it is I'm really able to connect with myself. So that's what writing does for me.
And so in your writing, but specifically in your writings in adventure, do you find that, well, or have you ever looked back to see what you have gotten from an experience? Or is it because you've written it down, you feel like you're able to experience it again? You know what I mean? Like, do you have to
Mhm.
look back at it? Because, like you were saying, being able to taste it twice, right?
Mhm.
Like, you were there for it, but then writing it down, how
Mhm.
do you feel like your recollection of your experiences has been impacted by your writing?
Right. That's a great question. To me, when we write things down, it gives it credibility and validation, right? So one of those one of the things that from the 13 weeks of adventure that I didn't even think about, because it's so near and dear and such a part of culture, is like the West Indian Day Parade,
Mhm.
right? For people who aren't from New York City or might not be familiar with West Indian culture, that is a foreign thing. It's not something they're familiar with. But when I write about it or share about it, it gives it this immortality again. There's
Mhm.
an ability to continuously go back to it and reference it. It's the same with when we take pictures from, the beginning. You can see how things evolve. And for me, that ability again to like taste it twice is not only for myself, but for others to recognize there's a critical mass that happens when we talk about something. Something
Mhm.
comes into pop culture because enough people are talking about it. And that's that animation of life, right? We say culture dictates what is popular, what is valued. And it might not always be the things that are available in the dominant, society or the dominant culture. But in animating it, in writing about it, in videoing it, in documenting it, we give it life.
And I think what also colors that life, as a note, you handle details very beautifully.
Oh, thank you.
You do an incredible job of adding details to things in my reading of your work that I didn't even realize were like, oh shit, I that was good to know. Um, and one of the things that I have to say I really enjoy about your, especially the 13 um, weeks of adventure, was the way you added a lot of historical context to the places that you visited. Like, it was the detail that you included that made it more interesting. So kudos to you for that. For
Thank you.
one, like, I don't know that you know or notice that you do that, but you do a beautiful job with details.
Thank you.
And thank you for that, because it makes your writing more enjoyable to me. That is
Mhm.
my personal experience of it. And I will say that, what was it? It was the Wave Hill.
Mhm.
You have me wanting to visit so
Go,
bad,
please.
because it makes me think of this garden in Rhode Island that Jay found.
Mhm.
We just, like, neither of us had been to Rhode Island, and we were doing a New England road trip. And so,
I saw that.
in an attempt to have a reason to visit, it was one of the most beautiful little caveats, little detours, and I had the most incredible time. And that's what you elicited for me when you were describing Wave Hill. And so
Mhm.
I definitely want to visit there. And the more I travel, and I guess also it may, as a personal reflection, I think it helps me more because I have someone to talk about it with.
Yeah.
Because I used to journal, but unfortunately, that is not something that I have ever been consistent with.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where every like couple of years, I'll be at my parents' house, and for some reason, I'll be up in my room and I'll go through like my journals as a kid, and I'm like, girl, you was stressed.
You.
Like, you was going through some things like you had
No.
no business.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like I had tried, and I'll always try to start that back up, and I'll be it. And I, kudos to myself, I've got some very pocketed
Yeah.
segments of my life. And so I just wanted to loop back and say, if you are thinking about journaling, even if you are like me and cannot do it consistently, give yourself something. Because
Yeah.
when you mention it being a documenting of your life,
Mhm.
no one else is going to do that for you.
Mm-mm.
And no one else is going to appreciate that like you will. There will be other people that can appreciate that, like family and all that other jazz, but like, you get to be important also. And
Mhm.
so I think, in not the sense of beating myself up, but in the sense of, I wish I knew more about me. And I can fill that in by
Mm.
being more consistent with things like that. And so, since I haven't been consistent with journaling, I have, however, been consistent with the podcast.
Yes, you
And
have.
so talking about my travels and like having conversations about the experiences in the travels. It's kind of been like a journaling experience, if you will. And I
Okay.
feel like that's why I like running my mouth so much, just because it's like it gets out, because I very much identified when you were saying there's so much going on. Like there just be a lot happening in my head. Like I can sit and stare at a wall and be completely entertained. Not on no crazy shit, but there are so many topics in the world. How is there not something you want to think more about? You know what I mean?
Right.
That's just the way my brain functions.
Mhm.
And so being able to connect me at home in a park and me at in Montreal in a park is something that I am grateful that I have, and it's something that I want to do more of. So
Mhm.
my next question for you is, how do you find the places that you visit when you are tapping into your at-home adventurer? Like what does your search process look like?
So where I start is I begin with what I enjoy. So
Mhm.
I love fine dining. I love nature. I love plants. I have plants all around me in my house. I like being outdoors. And what you notice with the details is I love history. Like I am a
Mhm.
history buff. Like I'm gonna nerd out and say like I got the highest U.S. history exam regent score in my high school when I took it. Right, like
Go
and
off.
right, but I really enjoy history, and it goes back to that point of validation. It's like, what
Mhm.
are we time stamping? What are we saying is important? And culturally, in U.S. history, we have Confederate statues up throughout the United States. What does that say about us as a society? What is These are the questions that we need to be asking. And so when I write and I am essentially giving validation to whatever it is that I'm writing about. Um, so beginning with that, I
Mhm.
go back to the things that I enjoy. So Wave Hill, for example, is a park. It's a green space. And I didn't know much about it. My idea when I posted 13 Weeks of Adventure is like, if somebody's coming to New York City and they don't want to see the Empire State Building, they don't want to see the Statue of Liberty, they don't want to go to the places where everybody's going to send them the High Line.
Yeah,
Um,
I hate the High Line.
can you not? We're not going to say we hate the High Line, though.
I
Okay.
wasn't impressed at all. Got great photos, incredible content, but it was just like,
Right.
bruh, this is like the sidewalk over the sidewalk.
Right. And it's congested, right? So the question is, how do you get a taste of New York that is not being pushed and is going to be crowded? And
Mhm.
yeah, that was it to me. So every place that I selected, and Wyckoff House, when I learned that it was like in Canarsie, the oldest structure in New York State, I was like, blow me down. Like, what do you
Yeah. Why didn't we know?
why don't we know these things? It's giving that understanding of like, these are things that matter to me anyway.
Yeah.
And I want to know more about them. And I know if I'm curious, if it's one, it's 100. And if it's
Mhm.
100, it's 1,000. So there's somebody who wants to know more about New York City and be more connected to the spaces that are around us. So that's where I begin. I begin with what I enjoy. And then from there, I find spaces that are more nuanced, not as talked about, but still carry that weight of significance.
Mhm.
And so that's where I begin.
So, question for you: have you ever had your experiences changed by a visit? Like you go into it knowing, okay, I'm interested in this. Like, let's say wine tasting. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, wine tasting. This is cool. Have you ever been to a destination that either increased your interest in something or say decreased your interest in something? As an example, I feel like I like animals as much as the next city girl. Like, oh, they're
Mhm.
cute, but like,
Yeah.
But I think going to the Ebony Horsewoman Equine Center in Hartford, Connecticut
Okay.
gave me a new appreciation of being able to see animals outside of, I don't want to say entertainment, but okay, no, there are holistic benefits to this. There are ways that we can experience what would be a typical tourist attraction. Like, you ride horses in the Poconos, or you go ride horses in a beach in Jamaica or something like that.
Right.
But here it was like an hour and a half from the crib. Like, they're using equine therapy to actively help and treat people,
Right.
and to be able to just tap into something nearby that you somewhat associate with a vacation
Mhm.
activity
Mhm.
was a nice reframing. It was a way to kind of say, all right, so I want to take my dog and experience, a nice outdoor. I want to give her more than just Queens. You know what I mean? Like, I would like to give her fresh air, or like really big open space to run around that's not stopped by a gate. Like, just interacting with animals has more than, is this a sedated animal behind, at like an elephant sanctuary or like those tiger
Mhm.
sanctuaries.
Yeah.
So, like, those different experiences, whether at home or abroad for me, have kind of shifted how I think about animals in different ways. Have you ever had an experience that you went into with like one frame of mind, and then be shifted in some way after an experience?
100%. I write about the experiences that I enjoy. So I've visited more than 13 places. I haven't written about every place
Mm,
because um, some of them, there was one in particular, I'll be straight up about. It was underwhelming and I couldn't understand. I didn't have anything positive to say. And I was like, I'm
mm,
not gonna bad talk anything. Like, this is my space, and within my space I'm gonna big up what is of value and what is, important to me. So I was honest in that way, and I believe in giving people value. So
hmm
I will deliver that which is of value. Within the space of, like, I enjoyed myself even more than I thought that I would. It wasn't part of the 13 weeks of adventure, but I wrote about it when I was in New England myself as well. It
hmm
was the Railway, um,
hmm
in the White Mountains of,
Okay.
I believe, New Hampshire. New Hampshire? I believe it's in New Hampshire.
hmm
And on ground level, where we got onto the train, it was fall. It was autumn.
mm,
The leaves were all the colors: orange, red, yellow. And as we started going up the incline of the mountain, it became winter and we reached
mm,
not even the summit, but like a mid level. And it was snow covered. It was snowing. The sky was white. It was incredible. And it really showed me, like, you don't have to make, and this kind of wraps into travel within itself, is you don't have to make a great change in distance or a great space um, between yourself and where you've begun in order for the climate to change completely. Um, that was such a really good, I know that was such a really
yeah.
good experience. And it made me want to go back because the guide of the tour was saying on a clear day, like if we were to visit in the summer, you could see past Maine and you could see the Atlantic Ocean essentially if we had kept going up to the summit and everything else.
Oh,
And
wow.
I know, right? So it was a really cool place, and it was cold as hell. So I was really excited to get back down to like the base camp level, but yeah, it travel does that. I find that I go into spaces expecting one thing, and
hmm
it can pull the rug from you, and in the best way or in the worst way.
yeah.
Yeah.
um How do you feel that you leave love in the spaces that you visit?
Mm, great question. Um, I'm quick to reference. I'm quick to tell somebody you need to go there, or I think that
Mhm,
you'll enjoy this. I'm similar with books or anything that I really read, and that's why I love in travel is the newsletter that it is. That's why it has a community corner where I highlight other writers' works. It's where
mhm,
I have, tidbits where I add an extra piece of adventure for you to chew on until the next iteration of my own work. I think that our gifts aren't our own. So
Mm.
if I enjoy something, I imagine that there's somebody else out there who enjoys it. So I like to share in that way. Um, Also, being in the space of vulnerability where I can talk about what has impacted me or what's changed me. Um, I think about one of my favorite podcasters, my Leeke Teal. She
I
is,
love my leak.
oh my
I
God.
love my leak.
I've been listening to her.
Stand down from Curlbox days. From Curlbox. When Curlbox was new, my leak is such an
Gem
incredible
drop.
woman. Yeah, like she really, back when I had hair and I was a natural hair blogger, when I tell you, like, she really supported me and had me on that Crowbox list. And I went to so many incredible, incredible hair events and just really made me feel like, oh, I can have a voice someplace and I can be seen, heard, and respected someplace. So this is absolutely a My League stand space. Like, and she follows up and backs up her words. You know what I mean? Like to see a woman of action
Yeah.
that but continue, yes. So
No,
yes, we love my league.
that is to say, we've never talked about my leak, but we have
Nope.
that same stand quality
Experience
with
of
her
her,
because,
absolutely.
I mean, she makes me want to show up. Like,
Yep.
you you can't hoard your gifts, right? And there's always something to give. That is my motto. Like, there's always something to give because,
Mhm.
and I know that I'm talking about it, I'm like, I'm forgetting what my quote is, but
It's
um
in there. It's in
yes,
there.
no, I got it.
It'll come to you.
It's here. It's here. There's always something to give because you can always give encouragement. If you see
Mm,
somebody and you walk into a room and they're having a conversation, maybe that you can't necessarily jump into, you can always say, you know what, that's a really good idea. What book did that come from? How can I, learn more about this? Can I follow up with you about this? And there's always something to give, and there's always something to gain. Um, and going back to what I was saying, there's an opportunity when we share to lift somebody else up. We're providing something that they can gain and is of value. And I carry that with me because that's a responsibility. Like, we are here. Martin Luther King said, service is like the rent we pay on earth, basically.
yeah.
That's not the proper quote. Y'all don't quote me on that. But y'all
Right.
know what the
We get the
actual quote
yep.
is. Service, and if we can all act in service to one another, then we are continuously providing something and lifting somebody up and feeding, and everybody eats. So that's where I come from. That's what I want with my work. That's how I intend to leave. That's the love that I leave when I travel to these places. uh, and I think my favorite bit of traveling is taking in the scenery. Going back
Mhm.
to my love of details, I mean, don't put me on a beach, I'll stay there all day. Don't put me in the
I love a
mountains.
beach.
Don't put me in the mountains, I will be looking up at the trees. um, there's always something. There's a way to find beauty in every single landscape, and that includes people as well.
Mm.
Though that might be a little bit harder, but it's there. And that's what I want my residents to be, is being able to find beauty and leave that behind.
That made me think of one of my favorite personal mantras is you can learn something from anybody if you ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's a great pivot to the next thing I wanted to ask you. Who's someone that you've recently learned from? Whether it be someone or something that you've learned in the scope of love or in the scope of travel? Like, is there anybody who has come across your purview in the last couple of days or weeks that may have stood out in those two areas for you?
I just I'm a fan of memoirs,
Mm,
and I just finished Safia's Sinclair. She's a poet.
okay. Okay.
Her memoir was called How to Say Babylon, and she really spoke about, I guess, how her upbringing has shaped so much of her own identity and what she chose to take on and also let go of through, her upbringing in Jamaica. And again, as a poet, reading her work and the way that she intertwined so much beauty into her writing, I I'm like moved to buy her actual poetry book.
Mhm.
And also Jackie Verbal, she is on Substack. She created Blackstack, which is it's a community, but also
Yes.
she produced a magazine of over 70 Black writers, got all of their works, made a compilation of it, and now it's a hardcover coffee table book. She also has a memoir, um, and I read that before the new year. I read that going
Okay.
into the new year, and I drafted her an email, and I was like, "Wow, thank you for this."
Mhm.
It tells her story. It speaks to her mindset, and I would say those two individuals reading their work and seeing the ways that they carry so much grace and so much love
Mhm.
within their hearts, even after experiencing heartbreaking experiences. There's something to be said about that you can still give and share with others when things have been challenging for yourself.
Yeah, I can see that. I can absolutely see that, especially that last part you were saying, because I also follow her on Substack, and I know she's had a lot going on.
Mhm.
Sending her a lot of love through everything she's got going on. And yes, congratulations on, because I think it was, what did I just recently see? Something about like, was it a year since she created Black Stack or did the coffee book or something?
She, her, and I think is today the 7th.
It is.
It's been 1 year since she started her Substack. So in
Yeah.
1 year's time, she
Yeah. So much.
gathered, created, and has done so much. Yeah.
Shout out to her for that.
Shout out.
Speaking of gathering and creating, do you like hold on to like, I feel like you're also a quote girly. Do you love
I
quotes?
love books.
I used so my first job out of college, I was wild disrespectful of them people's little cubicle walls. I
Okay.
used to print out quotes. I had dozens of them.
Okay.
It was quite obnoxious. Like I would print them out, highlight them. I had different color coord. I think I even had different areas for different pieces of encouragement. And so I had
Hmm.
quotes all over my little cubicle, little corner.
Hmm.
But in terms of collecting nuggets, have you collected any little trinkets or memoirs? Not memoirs, trinkets or memorabilia from different travels that you've been to that you reflect back on? When you look at, they remind you of an experience or a location or a general sentiment from your travels.
Yeah. I love Christmas because it's my mom's favorite holiday. And growing up, it brings me so much warmth and memory to think about the house and how it smelled and um, the beauty of the tree. So wherever I travel, my husband and I, we've made a practice of wherever we travel, we get a Christmas ornament from there. So it's not necessarily that the item itself is marketed as a Christmas
Got you.
ornament. It can be a little drum that's like this big.
Hmm.
I'll hook a string on it and it'll sit on our
Yeah.
tree. You know what I mean? Uh,
Hmm.
but that's how, and for me, Christmas as an end of year wrap up, being able to observe where I've been,
Yeah.
through watching the tree and decorating the tree and being able to give thanks for what the holiday um, and the end of the year really culminates to. That's one of my favorite elements of travel is being able to take something back that I know will, eventually when I have a family, our children will ask, where's this one from? Where's that one from?
Yeah.
Everything has a story. Everything, has a lineage. That's really important to me.
You mentioned about the end of the year and culminating. What or has there been anything that you have seen change in yourself over, say, the last year or so of doing your Substack, in terms of the way you share or in terms of the way you experience things while you're traveling?
Yeah, for me, when it comes to my writing, my like North Star is potency.
Okay.
I don't I don't worry about length of the piece. I don't worry about that's a lie. I do worry about if people will receive it. I want people to receive it. I want to know certain things, but I think at the end of the day, when I publish something, I always ask myself, like, is this as potent as it can be? Poetry has that opportunity because often it is brief, and you can send an image through as little words as possible. But I think about my favorite piece, which is called Labia, and I
Hmm.
wrote about the way labia, vaginas, are regulated in this
Mm.
world. I compared them to the labia that are on flower petals. And hands down, that has been my most potent piece to me. It took me over
Okay.
3 months to write that. It was something that um, I'm very, very proud of. It's not even my most read piece, but it's up there. And so that is what I really think about when I write. I want to make sure that I am what am I trying to say? And then
Hmm.
make sure that I'm saying it.
Okay. Uh, do you see yourself more as like an introspection reflector or a future kind of like in what direction does your introspection tend to go? Do you tend to reflect more or do you tend to
Like expound more, outward.
yeah, like are you looking forward or behind the most? And not behind as in neither way like in a negative connotation, but like where do you find that your thoughts fall the most?
Uh, Very much with the introspection because, like I said, writing allows me to organize the thoughts that are in within my head, and so getting them down on paper
Mhm.
um, then allows me to move sentences around and think about, okay, again, what am I actually trying to say? Because I have
Mhm.
these stray thoughts, and I am digging through emotion essentially, and a lot of times, for example, anger is a secondary emotion. It flares up because we're trying to protect something, right? We're
Okay.
trying to protect our vulnerability. We're trying to protect our pride. We're trying to protect something. And when I think about weeding through all of that, it's like, what is actually at the bottom of all of this? And so, with a lot of my writing, they say, write angry, edit level-headed, essentially, right?
Okay.
So I am a quote girly. I have a lot of them in here, but I am with my writing. I want people to connect with their emotions, and I realize that's where potency comes from because the more I'm able to
Mm.
do it myself, the more it is transferable. There's another quote that's no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. So if
Mm.
I'm unwilling to dig and be vulnerable and really expose myself, then, why would anybody read it? They're not getting anything from it.
So, where do you think a where have you been like the most exposed? Like what visit or trip or whether it be local or
Mhm.
far, have you felt like you've been the most vulnerable or the most opened to parts of yourself?
There's two that immediately jump to mind, and I've written about both of them. I traveled to Jamaica for my 25th birthday. That was my first solo trip.
Mhm.
Again, shout out to my league because she encouraged people to solo travel. She was like,
Mhm.
forget if anybody else is ready. Are you ready? Go. And I went. Um, I was having a hard time in grad school. I really that was a trip that I wanted to escape.
Mhm.
Clearly, period. End of story. I wanted to be separate from my life in as it was when I was in school. And what's funny is you cannot outrun yourself because
No.
I spent maybe about 4 hours on that trip crying in Jamaica, like tears in paradise. I
Mm.
was in my Airbnb and I was like, I got coconut water. I'm on the beach
Sun, sand, and I don't want to
and I am
do it.
still sad. I am sad. And that was like, that, talk about the rug being pulled out from underneath you.
Yeah.
You cannot run for yourself. And so I came back to United States. I got into therapy. And I was,
Something had to give.
something has to give, because if I am here crying, and it was a solo trip, so it's me and me.
Yeah. You can't blame it on nobody else.
Nobody
Nobody,
else.
like, it's
It's me and me.
it's
That's it. And then um is it 2 years ago? I think 2 years ago now. I went to Cartagena with my husband,
mhm.
and it was beautiful.
I love
And
it there.
again, it was another situation where I was being faced with myself. And it was well, it was another Tears in Paradise, but I think I was better equipped
Mhm.
to see it for what it was, rather than in Jamaica it's like, why or how or what is this? And I was being held up. I was being shown a mirror, and
Mhm.
I in some ways I'm still working through it. I mean, we're always working through something.
Absolutely.
Uh, I'm grateful for the mirror because it allowed me to know what next steps to take, pretty much. So
Okay.
yeah.
So, how have those like experiences influenced the way you, or have they even influenced the way you plan future travels, right?
Mhm.
Like knowing that you can't leave
It's
yourself behind, right? Has that influenced how you navigate or negotiate certain arrangements for your travel in general? Are you sure to include certain things? Are you sure to avoid certain things? Like, how do you manage yourself
Mhm.
while you're traveling now, knowing that those experiences have kind of, you know, impacted you in some way?
Mhm. I think the number one thing is because I get hangry, like
Mhm.
Incredible Hulk hangry. So especially with travel, hours can pass, and if you're moving, and especially in unfamiliar situations, you're not checking the time as much.
Yeah.
So being mindful about my eating, so that way I'm not getting snappy and turning into a different person. Um, it and also making sure that I'm speaking up about the things that I enjoy. Because sometimes if you travel as a group or with other people,
Hmm.
there's a group idea of like, we want to do this, but there should always be space where there's a day where people can, travel on their own or have experiences on their own. If they want to stay in their room for the day, they can do that as well. So it's travel is just like real life, being able to speak
Yeah.
up for yourself, being able to care for yourself. Um, because again, it doesn't matter the location. If we're not doing the work, it shows.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with you. That immediately, I won't say somewhat triggeringly, but that immediately makes me think of like the first time I went to Miami. It
Mhm.
started out on a bad foot. I was supposed to go with one of my homegirls, so I flew into Orlando to drive with her from Orlando to Miami.
Oh wow.
And this was when I was 25.
Mhm.
And she ended up like couple days before, maybe like 4 days, 5 days before, like the Monday before the weekend, I was just like, "Yeah, it's been too much on my birthday. Can't go, girl." She was supposed to get the rental,
Oh no.
and so it was just like, "Okay, okay, okay." 25 in my first apartment, first
Mhm.
big girl job. I was broke, so I'm just like, how am I gonna rent a car?" And now I gotta drive by myself. That was also probably one of the first
Mhm.
like long distance drives I'd done. One monkey don't stop the show. I made it to Miami
Good for
and I
you.
linked up with the other women that I was going to travel with,
Mhm.
and they ended up dictating the entire trip.
Oh, wow.
The entire trip. Love them down.
Mm-hmm.
Truly do. They were my ex-boyfriend's older sisters. And so they absolutely viewed me as like the little sister, like, no, you're not going by yourself. We don't know them. We know them. So you're going to come with us. We go together, we come together. Don't play.
Mm,
And so it was like I had traveled there and it was like me, the younger sister with the oldest. So I just wasn't comfortable in saying, listen, I spend more time with like my friends from school that are down here. Also, I want to go hang out with them. I know them niggas, not these niggas y'all know. Like it was, and so when you said that, it immediately reminded me of that and how I have changed in my travels, because that was one of the first times that I had traveled out. Like I'd been on a trip, and that was like the first and only actual girls trip I think I've done outside of traveling with my mom.
yeah.
But that experience kind of shaped my, future experiences. I ended up not doing any other group trips. I am not really a group trip girl
Yeah.
because I know that in stressful situations, like I may not speak up the way I would want to. But also now I'm like bigger version of me, and I just don't have the energy for doing things I don't want to do. So I see
Right.
that change in myself, where now I know that I don't want to hurt your feelings by
Mm-hmm.
saying I don't want to do this, or I don't want to have to go into planning. So what are we doing on this day? What do we So I tend not to travel with other people. The
Right.
only people I've ever traveled have been my partner's best friends, and those have been fantastic trips because
Right.
they've traveled together and they have that understanding of, oh no, bruh, y'all go ahead, we'll link for dinner, it's no big deal.
Right.
And so it's like that
Right.
already came built in
Right.
because they've had different experiences traveling as a group. And
Yeah.
so being able to intertwine those travel experiences from our two very different worlds was chef's kiss. That was a really beneficial pivot for, differing experiences. And
Right.
so I wanted to follow up by asking, how can we support you? How can travel and shit listeners and listeners beyond, visitors, anyone, how do we support you in what you're doing?
Read my work. I post weekly. I returned on January 13th, and
Oh,
I
that was my grandpa's
that's
birthday.
my birthday. Yes. So,
Really? Oh, happy
mhm.
belated.
Thank you. I post weekly throughout the year, and then I take a sabbatical the week of my husband's birthday, so about until like about the last week of October. And so I
Mhm.
take about 2 months off in November and December leading into my birthday in the new year. But other than that, it's an exciting time to write, to share, to learn more, and always to hear feedback from others about what they're
Mhm.
doing, and what they really enjoy, because that always piques my interest. So you can follow me at or subscribe at rachelleek.substack.com and keep up with all the good stuff that I'm up to.
The link will absolutely be in the description box. And I definitely think, time back to your initial comment about documenting
Mm-hmm.
what is important, the world as it stands right now, it
Mm-hmm.
is particularly important for us to just document our experience of life.
Right.
There's no telling what the future holds, but under any administration, under any conditions, that is always the truth. We
Right.
will never be able to read the future. I don't want to say our only option, but our only option is to live in the present.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be present. And I agree with you along the lines of it being important to document, especially as Black people, especially as people of color. It is important for us to be able to tell and control our own narratives and to carve out whatever space of the world it is that we are able to lean into our curiosities, express ourselves, and tell our stories the way we see fit. So,
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, thank you so very deeply. And thank you so much for joining me and for adding your story to the greater travel and shit sphere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I will see you guys next week. And be sure to check out Rachel. Links in the description box as always. And we do this shit again next week. All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.